Good evening. Welcome to another episode of the DMV Daily Radio Show. Of course, I'm your host, Hassan Giordano, back in the building, aka Mr. Politics. And today, I ain't got a damn clue what we're going to be talking about. But nonetheless, of course, if you read my latest piece in the DMV Daily podcast or program, DMVDaily.news, you know that Senate President Thomas Mike Miller revealed a little bit yesterday during the first day of session while we were down there, but came out with it today that he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. So our thoughts and prayers are with the Senate President, his wife Patty, and his entire family. Before we get into our program today, as always, I have to let you know that this program is brought to you by our fine sponsors, such as that stellar legal team known as the Bates & Garcia Law Firm, specializing in criminal defense, real estate, and bodily injury cases. Bates & Garcia is Maryland's legal dream team. So make sure to contact them today for your free consultation. 410-814-4600 is the number. And remember, tell them the DMV Daily referred you, and they will give you the special homeboy discount. 410-814-4600 is the number. I've also convinced that stellar political team to give a homeboy discount. All you got to do is reference DMV Daily. Of course, I'm talking about that savvy political strategist team known as Politicom Strategic Solutions, who have mastered the art of political communications and have successfully gotten people elected since the 1970s. If you're thinking about running for office in 2020, something that we think somebody else is about to do that we'll reveal later today, make sure you give them a call to get your campaign set up with a user-friendly website, integrated social media, campaign plan, and more. You can be reached 240-242-7505 is the number, or look them up on the web, www.politicomsolutions.com. And of course, with the new year in full swing, so is the DMV Daily Media, as we are set to launch all new podcasts and live stream radio shows all this month, such as the weekly Annapolis Report. You heard it earlier this week on Monday. Of course, your man, Mr. Politics, was down in the General Assembly yesterday for the first day of the 90-day legislative session. And every Monday from now through April, you'll be able to find out what's going on down in the legislative session in Annapolis by going to DMVDaily.news and going to the Annapolis Report. Of course, every Monday I'll be talking about the bills being introduced, committee hearings, dates and times, and the lowdown on all the smoke-filled backroom deals that take place down there. Of course, you can always catch a snippet of that report every Tuesday morning from 7:15 to 7:30 a.m. on Larry Young's morning show, WOLB 1010 a.m., where I'll be able to give you a couple minutes of that report. But listen to the report in its entirety every Monday, DMVDaily.news, under our podcast section, Annapolis Report. This week's episode coming up will be entitled A Family Affair. We talked to Jolene Ivey, the former state delegate, now turned city councilwoman, as well as her son, Julian Ivey, who has become the youngest African-American ever elected to state delegate in the great state of Maryland, as well as the youngest member of the Maryland General Assembly at this moment, 23 years of age. We talked to that family. Of course, Glenn Ivey was down there as well. The entire Ivey family, proud, of course, of Julian, and his accomplishments were down there. We had a great conversation with him, with the lieutenant governor, with the governor, and quite a few legislators as well. Tomorrow, part of that family affair article will not only be about the Ivies, but I have a great picture of Corey McRae and his entire family. To me, that was the best picture that I've seen all through the General Assembly yesterday. Of course, many of the legislators being sworn in yesterday were down there with their family and loved ones, but that picture was the essence of a black family, in my opinion. Him, his wife, his sister, all his children. I mean, dressed to a T. It was stellar. Go to our DMV Daily Facebook page. You can see it on our Twitter page. You can see the picture on our Instagram page as well, but it'll also be in an article tomorrow as I talk about the youngsters who've taken over the Senate and in the House, both in the House of Delegates as well as in the state Senate tomorrow, as I talk to Julian Ivey, as well as Senator Corey McRae, and even more. We're also gearing up to launch the nationally syndicated legal podcast known as Law and Disorder with Ivan Bates. This is something that I'm actually looking extremely forward to. A weekly podcast you definitely don't want to miss. He's going to delve into legal topics from across the world, things that, we talk about, things that we discuss but never really get the full understanding of. Well, he's going to talk about that, as well as his partners from Bates and Garcia, and people from all around the country will be chiming in on that nationally syndicated podcast that we'll be producing as well. Also, you want to chime in, Political Pawn with Mark and Hassan. We'll be breaking down all the politics of Maryland and Baltimore, especially with the elections coming up. We'll be doing the Value My Vote 2020 podcast. Of course, I'm going to sit down with each and every candidate running for city council president, comptroller, and mayor here in the city of Baltimore, as well as our federal congressional members, and probably try to get some of those presidential candidates as well on that Value My Vote 2020 podcast. That's something you definitely don't want to miss. But if you want your podcast here, you have an idea, you know that you want a podcast or you want a show live stream just like we do each and every day, or just once a week, make sure to give us a call today. We'll produce that for you. We do all the heavy lifting. All you got to do, sit down like I do every night and run your mouth. It's just that easy. We take care of everything else. We do your logo, website, get you your own RSS feed stream. So that way it's always podcasted on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Google Play, Facebook, Periscope, YouTube Live. Everybody can see you in any given time. So give us a call. 443-294-3900 is the number, or just give us an email at info@dmvdaily.news. You can always go to the website as well, dmvdaily.news. Go under any section that you want, whether you want to be, you want your own podcast, you want your own radio show, or we're still looking for citizen journalists. We need writers. To me, television is awesome. Radio is great. Podcasts are the thing of the future. But writing is to me the best form of journalism. Bottom line, if you can really write, if you have a passion for writing and you want to be able to articulate what's going on, it doesn't have to be about politics. It could be about sports. It could be about arts and entertainment, technology, love, couples, marriage, whatever you want it to be. If you think it's of interest that you want to be able to put your thoughts to paper and put that out to the world through the DMV Daily website, make sure they give us a call, holler at us, go through the website, and we'll make sure to get back into you. Now, today, if you want to join today's conversation, make sure you call in or even just text your question or comment to the studio phone line. 410-819-2370 is the number. Again, 410-819-2370, or just go to our Facebook Live page and leave your question or comment there. I want to hear from you, even though I have no social media. Of course, I'm always got my computer and I got my tablet. Today, I ain't got none of that. So I'm lost right now in the big pond. I ain't even got no co-host. So I'm just really out there all about,
the legal eagles flying in. The legal eagles flapping in.
So again, we want to hear from you today. What do you want us to talk about? Now, I want to remind you that tomorrow we have a special guest coming in, the executive director of the Job Opportunities Task Force. None other than my girl, the remarkable Karen York, will be in the building tomorrow as we dissect everything that's going down in that 90-day legislative session. Of course, she is the executive director, longtime lobbyist of this group. She knows Annapolis in and out as good as anyone that I know. So we're going to talk about the Mike Miller situation. We're going to talk about the Senate and the House. We're going to talk about the new members, the 60 new members. It's almost 1/3 of the 188 members are new down there in the Maryland General Assembly. We'll be talking about the bills that you can watch out for. And we also want to actually talk to you, family, and find out about any legislation that you think should be put forth so we can put that on the agenda and try to get a legislator to sponsor it before that deadline comes up later this month. But today is an open mic, so we want to hear from you. We want to know what you want to talk about. What's the pressing issue that you feel we need to discuss today? Of course, we have the 20th day of the federal shutdown and the government shutdown and the idiocy of this presidency. We could talk about the recent water bill hikes yet again passed by the Pugh administration just yesterday, even though, once again, our duly elected Comptroller Joan Pratt and City Council President Bernard Jack Young voted once again, as they have unanimously since these hikes have went into effect and came before the Board of Estimates. They voted against those tax increases. And we have breaking news as well. Two things. Tyler Watch, the Chief of Staff for Delegate Richard Impolier, he's a Republican from Baltimore and Harford County, has been charged with robocall violations. Once again, violating that authority line. State Prosecutor Emmett Davitt has charged him with that violation from last year's primary elections. So we'll see how that shakes out. And I just got a message as we were set to come on here that the newly elected Central Committee member down in the 46th District, who hasn't even been elected but for maybe even 6 months, has now said that she will have a special announcement. January 31st. Paris Bernard. Is that her name? Bernard? She's making a special announcement with which the person who sent this to me said that special announcement will be her announcement for City Council, she lives in the 1st District, which kind of then says if she's even thinking about running for City Council, which is the district that our good friend Zeke Cohen is in, means more than likely that Zeke Cohen will be running citywide. And what does that mean for the 1st District? I know our good friend Mark Edelson ran there last time, and I'm sure he'll run again. That'll be an interesting contest down there, especially if Zeke decides to run citywide. But again, hit us up, Facebook. Let us know what you want to talk about today as we get into everything Baltimore and Maryland.
Family, we do have a special guest that's on the line right now. So, everyone's talking about the newly nominated police commissioner, Michael Harrison. We actually have a reporter from New Orleans, from the New Orleans Advocate, on the line with us just to discuss exactly what is it that we're going to be getting in a police chief, Harrison, coming up here to Baltimore City. So let's get him on the line. Mr. Ramon, are you there, sir?
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for joining the DMV Daily radio program. So I reached out to you from one independent news outlet to another news outlet down in New Orleans, just so that we could try to maybe get a little taste and find out a little history on Michael Harrison and what type of police chief he's been for New Orleans and what may be expected when he comes up here to Baltimore, Maryland. And good afternoon.
I'm happy to. So you'd like me to just kind of sound off on?
Yeah. So we just like to know, what type of person, what type of chief has he been down there in New Orleans? What's the atmosphere like?
Yeah, no, he certainly presided over a police department that. I guess during his time, especially toward the end of his time, we've seen the city last year saw some key violent crime statistics, whether it's murders, non-fatal shootings, armed robberies, all had significant drops, and so that helped his reputation locally as well as nationally. And there were some I guess patrolling strategies certainly that he attributed that to, that certainly sound logical to the usually the quality of policing in a community, the better the quality, the lower the crime, and vice versa, right? And so that certainly helped his reputation both locally and nationally. And it was one of the reasons I think he ended up on Baltimore's radar. And the other, the progress, certainly there's been even, of course, the New Orleans Police Department has also been under a consent decree meant to reform the department after years of unconstitutional policing practices and several unjustified killings after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. So the New Orleans Police Department adopts a consent decree to reform itself, and Chief Harrison, from the federal judge who's overseeing that agreement and overseeing the progress on that agreement, has certainly lavished him with praise on a number of occasions. how far the department has come under his watch. So those are obviously the two I think the two things that put him on the radar for Baltimore. Certainly when you talk to him, the idea of trying to help a city which he sees is relatively similar. Obviously, both communities are different. The people in them have their own sets of challenges to deal with. Certainly, he sees similarities in it, and thinks that his I guess success here can translate up there. At the same time, no question that I think it financially it makes a lot of sense for him to do that, with his ability to collect a pension of about $160,000 a year per our calculations. And using the formula in which pensions are determined here, being able to supplement a pension like that after retiring in the North Police Department and getting a salary that I guess I've seen reports in Baltimore set in the range of $260,000 to $275,000 a year.
How long have you guys been under a consent decree down in New Orleans? And has Michael Harrison been the police chief or police superintendent, as you guys call it down there, the entire time? And have you seen a difference in how the police under this consent decree as we have here in the city of Baltimore?
So to answer your first question, they agreed to it in 2012, and then the document itself was approved in 2013. He became police chief in 2014, right? So the bulk of that agreement has been under the bulk of implementing that agreement and actually ticking. It's a 492-point checklist, basically, right? So most of the checks that are on that list at the moment all came under his watch. And for your second question, have you seen the police? Any changes in the police department? Certainly, citizen satisfaction and just I think the general relationship between the public and the police department over the years. Now that we're I think six years into the consent decree era, has improved. I think. Markedly, and I'll give you two, and most noticeably, use of force incidents have become pretty rare, relatively rare in New Orleans, at least by the police department. Right, there's overlapping jurisdictions where like some neighboring jurisdictions will sometimes have use of force incidents when an incident spills from their jurisdiction into the city, and then there's also the like Louisiana State Police. Also has powers to patrol parts of the city itself, and they'll have use of force incidents, have had use of force incidents, but ones that involve police officers have become relatively rare. There was earlier this month there was a fatal police shooting. And it had been nearly 2 years since the previous one, which in recent memory was certainly the longest stretch. Where and this incident, certainly when you look at the early facts, it was allegedly a man who first shot an officer in the chest. The police vest, the body armor vest, stopped the bullet from penetrating, and then I guess officers returned fire and fatally wounded the person that they had the encounter with, and it was a man by the name of Zonell Williams, and I think there was some. It sounded like it was some sort of 911 call, responding to a 911 call about a mental health crisis, and that's how it played out. But it had been 2 years, and nearly 2 years between that fatal police shooting and the previous one, and I just use that to illustrate in recent New Orleans memory. I mean that was a stretch that it had been a long stretch by standards in New Orleans.
So let me ask you something.
And like I said,
we
use body cameras, and the thing is that you can, and because the consent decree, the police department has used body cameras, and there's penalties for when they don't activate it when they're engaging in interactions. You can gauge the truthfulness of their story about any certain incident because nearly everything is recorded these days, and those are just two examples.
So in Baltimore, we have an issue that many advocates are upset about, whereas though when a citizen files a lawsuit against the police department and they win this lawsuit, they are then silenced and are not able to talk about the incident in question or risk losing that money and being sued themselves. Is that something that is a problem as well in New Orleans? Do y'all have that same similar problem?
I mean, certainly, you certainly will see. I mean, we've been able to use kind of public records laws to find out like the amount of a settlement, for example. We've been able to as reporters have been able to use, with it's on a case by case basis, but we can find out like what the amount is. But certainly, and this isn't just in the police department, right? This would be any number of groups and agencies that are public or quasi-public or either private, but obviously very prominent, where you run into when you start talking to, the attorneys involved to try to figure out, the thinking behind a settlement, and things like that. And you end up finding out that it's, that the agreement is, bars both sides from talking much on it. But sometimes we've been able to get, paperwork, and settlement amounts, which can speak to the level of, which can speak to the level of potential liability that might have been involved in the case. We've been able, just using our public access laws. I'm much less familiar with what they are in the state of Maryland.
I had a question. So I've argued with some of my colleagues here that some of the crime reduction in New Orleans hasn't been 100% attributed to policing. New Orleans has had a strong economy for over the last 12 months. Unemployment has been hovering around 4%, and some of the demographics or some of the folks that are coming back to New Orleans are not the same element that was there before, like in the lower Ninth Ward, with some of the issues that were going on with like the housing projects and some of the violent crime spikes of the past. Can you say that that's pretty much some of the case, or is it that Police Chief Harrison has truly demonstrated public safety in New Orleans and has really cleared up the violent crime and some of the issues in the city?
Chief Harrison will be the first person to tell you. We've interviewed him a number of times over the past couple of months, and then sat down with him again. He'll be the first person to tell you that certainly the police department play an important part of in kind of like have an important role, but they're certainly not the only people that have a role when it comes to crime reduction. He certainly will give his credit to. I mean, there have been initiatives to try to get people that are, I know that this, I know that this term is kind of very. It isn't the most precise, but to try to connect at risk, certainly people that some may consider at risk with social services, with recreational opportunities, with employment opportunities, and certainly he'll be the first person to tell you that programs that have succeeded, as those programs succeed, the police's job gets easier to try to fight violent crime and property crimes and things of that nature. What I will tell you is that the most noticeably you will find, as you go to community meetings, you'll find kind of more of that the police department, that the perception held by the public of the New Orleans Police Department is much different now than it was in the pre-consent decree era. I think that has a lot to do with his ability to drive those violent crime statistics down, to get that consent decree, to make progress on that consent decree, which, if pulled off, would turn the department around, and certainly the citizen satisfaction in the police department is much better right now, and I know that people are nervous about that changing once he leaves, but obviously that's our situation, and he thinks he's he'll tell you that he set up New Orleans Police Department, New Orleans to kind of be in the situation for a while, but yeah, no, I think some of the things that you said, I mean, he is very cognizant that it will take some on the things like education and recreation, and to that it's a holistic approach, and I think as you see him settle in, you'll hear more of those thoughts from him.
So let me ask you something. I know I'm not saying that you know Baltimore, but I'm sure you've seen the Freddie Gray and what happened after Freddie Gray, post Freddie Gray here in Baltimore, and since then we've had a state prosecutor who, while they charged the cops, that conviction was never upheld. In fact, they were all dismissed, and her prosecution rate has tumbled, let's say, since then. And there was no real relationship between the state prosecutor and the police chief here in the city of Baltimore since then. Has Chief Harrison had a working relationship with the state prosecutor down in New Orleans, and how has that relationship been, and how's the prosecutor down there? Have they been effective in the prosecutions that the police has given them?
Yeah, no, he is, works well with with people. Certainly, if you read in our record, I mean, his a former homicide commander, had a pretty contentious relationship with the prosecutor, the state prosecutor here. And certainly that's not ideal. Those are two kind of very important kind of tools in a city's the toolbox to try to tackle violent crime problems and try to keep that as low as possible. And if you read, you'll see that there was a change eventually made, and so I think he wasn't afraid to make changes, and therefore once. And that's just one example of him, I think, making decisions and being able to work with kind of his partners in whether it's in law enforcement or in the community. All that's very important to him, and all that meeting and meeting with stakeholders, and it wasn't just talk. He was visible and seen, and seen out there, and so therefore. Yeah, right now, I mean, things were well as far as the relationship between the state prosecutor and if you talk to them, I mean, certainly they strongly believe that their quality cases, cases that were quality cases built by the police that were then tried by prosecutors with high priority, people that would be considered high priority, right? Repeat violent offenders, especially as the state's been trying to kind of get away from just mass incarceration and incarcerating for, focusing on incarcerating only the people that will make the community safer, as opposed to just using it as a weapon in kind of low priority cases. So yes, and so that's one of the things to remain to be seen when there's a switch, when his successor comes, to see if the relationship holds up between the next leader of NOPD and the state prosecutor.
So are the people, grade the people on the ground, now that they know, I'm sure you've heard as a reporter, but even the citizens, that this police chief now, who's been there and seemed to have turned things around, is now leaving the job for another job in Baltimore. Are the people a little upset that they're losing their kind of commander, or is it just like hoping to get somebody as equally as good?
I think, you'll hear the phrase a lot you've been hearing is that New Orleans' loss is Baltimore's gain. You've kind of heard that over and over. That's a kind of common refrain as people have kind of come to terms with the news. I think people are happy for him. Obviously financially for him. He, you'll find a lot of people in the various sectors of the city. They're happy for him. He's a lifelong New Orleanian. Been at the department for 28 years. And so there's some, certainly there's some concern about whether things will get worse after he leaves. But at the same time, I mean, I think the consent decree feels like a safety net, I think, for people, right? Things have been going well, and I mean, certainly they're not going to be released from that agreement until the a federal judge evaluates everything and says that they're there. So I want to say that people kind of view that as a safety net. The other thing, I mean, certainly he's done. He certainly implemented just certain changes that have been identified as best practices by other departments, There's a couple of them, and especially one is called this team that kind of builds. It's a hybrid of like detectives and tactical officers, and they build these long-range investigations. No matter how long the case takes, they're kind of freed from the burden of having to hit quotas or anything like that. No matter how long a case takes, they stay on it until it's completed. So those have been identified by other places as best practices, and so they feel that they wouldn't get away from them. And there's a strong sense. The mayor's office here has all but come out and said that they're going to stick to that. They're just going to elevate someone already inside there, internal. And so I think kind of between those two things, it feels like it won't. It doesn't necessarily. It feels like you're pretty on solid ground even as the transition moves on. I think people are happy for him because certainly financially it makes a lot of sense for him to make this move, and I think prestige-wise, if he can have any measure of success in helping improve the perception of the Baltimore Police Department and just make Baltimore a better place, obviously that can be good for him as well. But no, he certainly leaves with a good reputation, and the same can't be said for many people who have had that job before him.
Mr. Vargas, this is Ivan Bates. Wanted to ask you a question. Listen to everything you've said. If you were a citizen living in Baltimore City, would you be excited with the selection of the police commissioner? Knowing our history in terms of what we've been through.
I know in very broad strokes. I know in very broad strokes kind of the situation that Baltimore is in, and kind of what he's walking into. I think, take this for what it's worth. New Orleans is certainly, the powers that not only I think at all levels and all sectors of the city are sad to see him go. For what that's, you're getting someone that certainly I think a lot of people in that many people in New Orleans wanted to stay, and there's certainly some uncertainty about whether things are going to get worse because the department was in its best footing that it has been in years. So I think just kind of knowing that, I would certainly feel better than and. Yeah, I think I would be hopeful. I think I'd be hopeful that he could replicate some of the successes, and I guess it'll also. But he'll be the first one to tell you that. It depends on what kind of complementary efforts that they get from the school systems, from those trying to connect people with social services that help them get jobs, that help them get educated, that kind of try to keep them away from the things that motivate people to commit crime. But yeah, New Orleans didn't want to lose him. I'll tell you that.
Okay. So one of our live stream viewers, Shane Bryant, asked the question: what was his relationship like with the media? Did y'all have to really dig and fight to get information, or was the department more open and transparent?
No, it was. I'll say. If you put in a request for something, that you were entitled to, you would get it. And if it took, it would take, and within reasonable time, right? Never had issues getting records. Never had issues getting things of that nature. When there were use of force incidents, there's a protocol. They review the body cam. And on any number of them, there's a wrongful death lawsuit that is pending right now, and it was the prior use of force incidents that I'd mentioned a little earlier. The man by the name of Ortiz Manning was killed in a surveillance operation targeting someone else, and we were summoned. Play the video, showed us the body cam video that was available, multiple angles of body cam video, the incident, they discussed it, they discussed the results of their, those are things that didn't happen before him, and those things happened under him. It's a mixture of his willingness to just wanting to do that because it was the right thing, as well as the being called for by the consent decree. So yes, I mean his tenure was noticeably different from, and he had a courteous relationship with the media. I won't say cozy. I mean, certainly, and he, when and he took his lumps, I think, and especially when things went wrong, but and never, if he were fair, I feel like he felt that that reporters treated him fairly, and then likewise. And I mean, certainly it's inevitable you write negative stories about somebody, but he was always professional about it.
I know. I have a final question for myself. We had a Baltimore delegation go down to Texas to talk to John Fitzgerald, to the community. And one of the questions that were brought up was about how policing was actually being handled in Texas. And we have an issue here with open air drug markets, loitering. And in some cases, folks are saying that because of the consent decree, that the police officers here in Baltimore, they're handcuffed. They're not able to do their duties. How has Chief Harrison handled issues with open air drug markets? Do you guys even have gang type of activity or loitering type of activity down there? And how has he handled it under a consent decree?
I mean, I think you had mentioned that that a lot of people felt that early, a lot of the concerns when the consent decree was in its earliest days, right? Like this is going to make officers' jobs harder. This is going to make this is going to make it embolden criminals and make it harder. But obviously, at the same time, I mean, the city took some steps. You asked me about whether there's gang activity here. I mean, they've certainly done. There's the department has that unit that I told you about, right? Some of the cases that they build are focused on trying to disrupt some of that activity, right? Open air drug markets, I mean, I guess certainly it happens, right, in areas where people are dealing from, there's dealing out of, like, from the porches. You see this in court records. They're surveilling people who they have information dealing from their porch or dealing from the corner. But certainly, I mean, that Tiger unit, and I'm sure if you were to ask me, one of the things that you might see is him leaning on a unit like that to try to disrupt some of that activity, and the consent decree. I mean, if you think about it, right, you've got, there's a pretty well-developed street surveillance system here that there's evidence that they used it on, high priority people, high priority repeat violence. That's something you're going to hear over, repeat violent offenders, and using it was a tactical intelligence gathering and emergency response team or enforcement response team, kind of leaning on that. So he was able to kind of do that while under a consent decree, right? He was able to kind of remove people that they consider, high priority. That results in, I mean, there were fewer people trying to shoot each other last year. That is why that drop happened. At the same time, the 47-year low, the fewest homicides, fewest murders in 47 years in New Orleans, and there were enforcement strategies that they did to try to kind of produce those numbers. And they did that while under a consent decree, right? So I think that is what kind of makes he heard those concerns that a consent decree is gonna make it harder on police to do their jobs, is gonna make it hard, and I think he was able to, in a way, while they're arresting, focusing on arresting repeat violent offenders, the department's relationship with the community improved. It was palpable.
So let me ask you something. We about that to wrap it up, but that we have what's called the Civilian Review Board, right? And in that process, and I'm sure you probably have something, if not similar, down there. That's the question: is how interactive, how much teeth did the Civilian Review Board have in New Orleans? How did it work alongside the police department? And did a civilian, or does a civilian, or multiple civilians serve on your Civilian Review Board down there in New Orleans?
So I'm not entirely familiar with how that that might be. But I mean, I do want to be clear. I mean, that is a added level of transparency that that like Baltimore like will have, I think, on him. There was no civilian review board. There is an independent police monitor that is, in a sense, I mean, there's a city, it's an agency that's independent from the police department and looks things over. But I mean, certainly those wouldn't necessarily be like a, you know, it's not like a 7-person panel, right? There's one monitor, and then they've got a staff. And certainly they're kind of like they're a watchdog, but they're I wouldn't necessarily call that a civilian review board. So that is a additional layer of accountability that I think that the city of Baltimore will have than New Orleans has, even as things have gotten better, even as things are kind of at a good moment as he leaves. That is an extra layer that Baltimore will have as they try to hold him to account.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Well, Mr. That's it, gentlemen. So, Mr. Vargas, we really appreciate your time, and we appreciate your work down there in New Orleans, and we appreciate you extending the courtesy to us here on the DMV Daily Radio program.
Anytime, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
We might have to fly you up to testify before the city council, so they can elected members know before they confirm this young man.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Anything I can do to help, please feel free to give me a call. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow, that's interesting. That's a good report card, I would say, for Mr. Harris.
To me, it comes off as all A's. I mean, look, you're a police officer in the way that, unfortunately, our community views the police because of what's happened for years. Here's a police officer who's viewed as an individual and who's really doing police in the way that it should be. I mean, you have a community that's like, gosh, we're going to miss you. He's been a commissioner for 5 years, if I'm not mistaken.
4 years.
4 years. They're like, gosh, we're going to
5. He said 2014.
Yeah.
This makes the 5th year.
Yeah, but he's January.
Right.
So he's been there 5 years, right? Let's say 5 years. And when you sit down and look at the change that he's making, 80% of the police officers on the force like him, and the community, they feel like they're missing and losing someone. If you look at Baltimore, when's the last time we kept a police commissioner longer than 4 years?
And he did all of this under a consent decree.
Correct.
Exactly. So, I mean, a lot of the things, do I think there's going to be a learning curve? Yes. But do I think he comes in here with some good, amazing ideas? Yes. Do I think that he has just a couple of issues that I was interested to hear that they don't have in New Orleans? Yes. You know, police can be they can make 1 million arrests. They can be great. They can put those types of cases together. But you have to have the other partner, and it's the state's attorney's office. Yeah. You know, and that's the biggest weakness.
I'm very critical when it comes to the learning curve in Baltimore City. I think it's definitely a different environment. And, you know, some folks that have come here have experienced that, like Dr. Batts. But I do appreciate the fact that Chief Harrison understands that it's just not all the police. There has to be a wraparound approach. He believes in the recreation centers. He believes in the programs that are outreaching to those that are on public assistance and things of that nature. So I really appreciate the fact that he comes up here at least with that open eye, understanding that he's not going to be the cure-all. He's not going to be the solution, that he's going to have to work directly with the community and all the other organizations as well, if we're going to do better in this city.
Mark, where you at, man? Stop getting on Facebook. Call in.
You could have called in and answered a question. You know we know how to conference you.
But yeah, I mean that's going to be it. So I can tell you this, Madam Mayor, I know you're listening. You can come on this show anytime and talk about your selection for the next police commissioner. You can even have him come on the show if you don't want to come on. Anytime. Day or night. We'll even make a special. We'll come to City Hall for you and broadcast live while you can do. Matter of fact, we're broadcasting live January 21st, Martin Luther King Day, before I keep forgetting, 5 to 7 p.m. at the church, Union Baptist Church, right there. It's what is that? Union Baptist, right there where, right down the street from Sheila's church.
It's right over there off
McCullough Street.
Yeah, I go to church right around the corner.
Yeah, so
Metropolitan.
we'll be there from 5 to 7. broadcasting live as we host a public safety town hall hosted by DMV Daily. We'll talk about the eye in the sky, if that's even worth a conversation and discussion moving forward. Because I'm going to tell you something. Whether you're for it or against it, we just need to put this thing to bed, right? I'm tired of hearing about it, to be quite honest. Either we're going to do it or we're not. We're going to need to talk about public safety, how we move forward. Are we going to support this new police commissioner coming in? Or are you just going to stay on the sidelines to keep opposing? Because from all accounts that we're hearing, and you just heard it straight from New Orleans, from a reporter who had, he has no dog in his fight, no pony in this race. And he's giving him pretty much a report card. At some point, you got to stop rooting against the city, because that's what you do when every time there's a selection, there's opposition to that selection. You could be pessimistically optimistic, but nonetheless, we need to move forward. So we'll be talking about public safety. The citizens will have their voice heard. That's the biggest thing. We'll have elected officials there that we're inviting from the city council and state legislators. This is Martin Luther King Day, so everybody's off for the most part. So 5 to 7 shouldn't be an inconvenience time right over there. Union Baptist Church, the good reverend over there is opening up the doors for us. And we're going to make that happen.
Maybe, hopefully, we can get nominee Michael Harrison to stop by and talk about it.
One of the things, look, I personally feel that this was a great selection. I feel that, like I said, I'd spoken to my family that lives down there, and they told me the same thing that the reporter told us, that, wow, New Orleans loss is Baltimore's gain. But there are some people just hate police so much that they can't get over that.
Right.
I mean, I think eventually you have to realize that we need police. Right. Our society depends on police, and that it's a very difficult and dangerous job, and that we just need to have real transformative leadership.
See, my whole thing is not looking at it from the back end, is looking at it from the front end. Not grabbing the weed from out of the garden and pulling the leaves, but trying to get down into the root of the problem, so that we don't have to become a police state, so that we don't have to increase our budget to the point where we're spending half of our budget on public safety issues. And that's what I really want to concentrate more on. And again, that's my only biggest fear when I hear these people coming in, getting $250,000 salaries, plus he's still getting $100,000 pension.
Why exactly? Because I wouldn't. Like, you hate? No, why you hating? Why you hating?
I would, because
Jason,
again,
I never get
have
on
an
you,
issue.
I have an issue on this man.
No, I have an issue with the system overall. You understand? And again, my whole thing is, the system, again, that continues to pour money into public safety from the back end, from a back end approach, as opposed to looking at it from a front end, so that we don't need to be searching for the best of the best as far as.
But the problem is, we are here now. We have to do something.
I understand that. I understand that.
But I agree with you.
Our approach is always reactive. You understand? Our approach is always at the back end.
I agree with you. But
of course, again, I look at the fact that, again, there's a huge carrot on the stick to come to Baltimore right now. But, you know what I mean? And who knows what the golden parachute is going to actually turn out to be in the long run.
But think about it like this: if we pay this man, let's say $300,000, if you pay him $300,000 and he does everything we ever asked, and he slashes overtime, we're going to feel like, wow, we got over. It was a great investment.
And I think that's one of the questions we missed. We didn't ask about the budgetary issues as far as the department was concerned, and whether or not he was able to because a consent decree can actually really put a financial burden on a police department. I know that we're getting ready to spend at least, I think, like $4 or $5 million or something like that, just implementing the first stage of the consent decree. So that's one thing that we didn't ask Mr. Raymond, was whether or not they were able to still kind of keep things within, budget and reduce overtime.
I read an article where I think they went over the police overtime spending was like $2.5 million, which is a small drop in the bucket compared to what Baltimore has.
Right.
I mean, look, Let's just give him a chance.
And again, I have
And
an
that's what we
organization
gotta
called
do.
Cop Watch, so I'm always going to
So-
be anti-policing. I'm
And
always
that's
going to
a
be
problem.
looking at it, and I'm always. It's not a problem because
It
I'm
is
always.
a problem.
It's
First
not
of all,
because I'm
you're
looking
on the
at.
air. First of all, let's
Right.
get this straight.
We have-
This,
right,
no.
right.
This is a radio show.
Of course.
That we are
Of
supposed to. The host on here is supposed to be responsive to the people. That doesn't mean you're for or against anything.
No, that's
You're
not
supposed to
necessarily
be
true.
balanced.
You're gonna have some. You
That's
guys.
why
That's
y'all
why
ain't
you're the
on a
balance.
good-
You're the balanced person. I'm the advocate and the
You're
one
the
that's
producer.
Right.
Then let us be
No.
balanced. You over there,
No,
ranting and raving.
You
but
gotta
y'all
have
right.
the yin. You gotta have the yin and the yang. You gotta
Look,
have somebody
but, all
that's
right,
gonna be the
but you would
agitation
agree,
in the wash.
You would agree that many of the questions you had that the
Have been
reporter
answered.
Oh yeah, I think
raised
he's a great
was-
choice. Don't get me wrong.
Okay. Now we got the.
But I also still look at the
You hear
things
that,
like, for
Mark?
Stop
instance,
talking
the
and
learning
answer
curve
the
and things
phone.
of that
And
nature.
Mark's been trying to call in, and y'all ain't answering the phone.
Oh, sorry, Mark. Call back in, brother.
Yeah, thank y'all. It is Drew Hill. 1211 Drew Hill Avenue is the address.
Yes,
to Union
around
Baptist
the
Church.
corner.
Reverend Alvin Hathaway, my main man. He will be there in there. So you said you had to talk about some stuff when you came in. Well, you look sharp as a tack. What you doing today?
You know, today, my law partner, he goes to court. And
Who's that?
Tony Garcia. Tony Garcia, he goes to court. Now, I guess Mary was here yesterday to talk about her case. Right? And Tony had a case. Tony had a case where these police officers have body camera footage and they recover a gun out of a car. And the reason they said the guy has a tail light that's out, but they smelled marijuana, and that's why they need to pull this officer out. The whole time, Tony asked the state's attorney, like, well, can you give me the paperwork that shows where the marijuana was and was turned in? Oh, no. We don't need that. That's what the state's attorney in Baltimore City said. So Tony waits all day long. This man's in jail. He's been sitting in jail for, I think, 9 or 10 months. The judge refuses to postpone the case. The state's attorney says they're in trial, they're unavailable. The judge sent the case to where the prosecutor was at trial. The second the prosecutor finished that case, boom, Tony was right there. And you have what's called a motion, where you sit down to see what's going on. The video plays, the body camera footage, and Tony cross-examined the officer. By the time he finished with the officer, if he told you water was wet, you wouldn't have believed him. Because the officer had to admit, like, well, yeah, there was weed. Where's the weed? It was there. Well, we decided to leave the weed in the car.
Man, get the hell out of here.
So, wait. And once again, the officer's lying. He gets caught in the lie. And the judge is so irate, she throws the case out. Then she brings the prosecutor up and pretty much says, when are you going to stop doing this? When is your office going to really play fair and by the rules? Right. And that's important. And the reason that's important is because we can't sit down and just talk a good game. We have to be a good game.
Right.
So here's a person, when you look at this one person sitting in jail, 9 months, case thrown out. Mary had a handgun case yesterday, a young juvenile. Once again, that case was thrown out. 2 handgun cases that were thrown out because the police weren't necessarily being truthful. And then she has the other case on Tuesday involving Jarrell, and that case was no problem.
And that's why I say the system needs to be reformed, and I can't be pro for the system. I have to be looking at the front end and trying to figure out front end means of resolving a lot of these issues before these folks get into court and they're railroaded and evidence is not, accurately gathered like it's supposed to, and people don't want to follow the rule because they're just trying to sweep people off the street. That's why I'm more of an advocate of a front end and dealing with the root of the issue as opposed to pulling the leaves of the weeds. But
well, I think, with Harrison, this will be very important, very interesting. I feel like he's the type of police commissioner that is not going to stand for that. If you have weed in the car and you're riding around for gun, by all means, stop them legally, lock them up legally, and convict them legally.
So here's my thing. You gotta adjust the camera.
Mark's on the line. No, actually, I had it pointed at Ivan. That's why. Ivan was talking.
Pointed to the damn wall. Mark.
Yeah, I'm here.
What's up, man?
And we do have a caller too.
I was trying to hold my peace, But y'all already got Jason together, so I'm listening.
They ain't get me together. I'll always be anti-police and anti-law enforcement.
You know what? You anti-police.
I'll always be.
Let someone with a gun rob you. Who's the first
I've
person
been
you
robbed.
call?
I've been beating my face with big guns. Trust me.
And who did you call?
I didn't call nobody. I took it as a loss. There was nothing to call.
You know what?
Call after
I'm
the fact.
calling the police.
You call the police to put a report in. But what you gonna say?
You say you had an issue with calling the police, and they didn't want to believe you and all that other stuff?
What?
You even said yourself.
I never had an issue. I had an issue
You
with
just sat there and told the mayor this the other night and how she intervened because
the police came in the house
and
an illegal
you
search.
went to another officer and they wouldn't believe you.
We went to Internal Affairs, the process that's
Who's
supposed
the
to be in
officer, ain't
place.
they?
Who was an officer?
And they went, but you just said
And
you
he
don't care
didn't
about
believe,
the
and
police.
he didn't believe anybody's testimony that came in. But yet, my face and my medical records showed differently. Judge Littman showed differently in the court, threw everything out of the court, and reprimanded the officers.
Let me tell you something. If I'm listening to this show and I hear you running off at the mouth about police this and police that, I ain't gonna believe a damn thing that comes on this show because from an outside standpoint, it's a setup to prove your point.
It's
so
not
you
a setup
can't
for
never be
anything.
wrong. Just like with Jason the other day, Mark. I keep calling you Jason. Stop using Jason on this goddamn Facebook.
It's
man.
all about reform
You would
and
not
about
be
going
able
on
to
the
sit
front
there
end.
and even when we're reading you
what?
facts, it's y'all got to be wrong.
I didn't say he was wrong. I didn't say he was
sat
wrong.
there-
I said he sounds like a good choice.
No, the other day he
no,
sat there and talked about the
I just said that
population. Swore to God we were wrong when we're looking at
Oh,
the facts.
yeah, about the population.
And
I knew what the population was.
Everybody-
But
everybody
the people that have assimilated back into that city are not the same residents. Are not.
You know what?
And that's a fact.
But he's still doing a good job.
When you asked him, was it due to population shifts? He completely ignored you because it was that ridiculous.
No, he went into identifying the fact that it wasn't just Harrison was the main person. It was recreational centers. It was a wraparound approach, which is what I'm trying to get at
And it
here.
also was
it has
the
to be a
prosecution
wraparound
as
approach.
well.
Right? And strong prosecutions, making sure that the prosecution, that the state attorney's office
have a good
has strong,
relationship.
and are developing strong cases. That's a difference. That's something that we don't have now. We have a broken system here.
Exactly. That's what we're talking about, Ronald Miles.
Yes.
All these people that anti-police and look, I ain't gonna go out and tell my kids and all that whole stop snitching stuff, right? You don't go tell police on stuff, right? I ain't never gonna be for that. I'm sorry.
I'm not into the
But
anti-stop
you ain't
snitching
gonna
thing.
be.
I mean,
you ain't
into the
gonna be
stop snitching
into
thing.
no police this and they ain't this and that. That
I'm
makes no
into-
sense. That
I'm
just
like
makes
this.
it.
How does it not?
It does.
It's about
Look
it's
at it
about
like this.
stopping the industrial prison complex. It's about
ain't got a
stopping the
goddamn
things like
thing
The
to do
police ain't the
prison
ones who put
pipeline.
people on
Prison
prison.
industrial
No, but
complex.
you're not
Ain't got nothing to
understanding.
do with
Yeah,
that.
but in some cases they do. In some cases they falsify charges. In some cases and you have cases that you're dealing with on a regular basis of people that are being falsely accused, or in some cases you're having trumped up charges put on them.
You know, my thing is this. You know what? We are in a crisis. And right now, our front line, they're the police. So we need to support the good officers, and the bad officers will be gone.
And see,
now,
you
ain't
look
got
at
no
it-
police
You
in your
look at
family,
it.
do
You
you?
look at it. Oh, I have plenty. I have in New York. I have plenty of officers. Matter of fact, we have several
I can't
officers
tell.
here,
I can't.
right here in
Why you
Baltimore
hate
City.
the police
You're
so
not
much?
listening. I said I'm anti-law enforcement. I don't think that law enforcement is the answer to the solution. You prove my point when you
Answer the
sit there.
solution to what?
Hold on. You prove my point to public safety in this city. You prove my point.
Public
when you,
safety is
Listen.
police.
No, it's not.
Don't you
No, it's
understand
not.
about that?
No, it's not. Having strong communities, you won't have to
That ain't
worry
got
about
a damn
public
thing
safety.
to do with public safety.
When you spending
You don't know what you're talking
almost
about,
a
bro.
third of the budget, when you spending almost a
You're
third of the
mixing up
budget,
apples and oranges.
It's not.
I'm gonna
Yes,
tell you
you
what.
are.
I'm gonna
It's
tell you
not.
what.
It's
Let's
not.
say
Because
we
throw
gave
all this
every
money at
person-
public safety when that's not the
And
solution.
you know what? If we gave every single person a job, look, I'm a realist. If we gave every single person a job and they had job training, that would help some of them.
And it would still be
It
crime.
would. But there still is going to be a
I'm telling you, it would be.
How you gonna
still
tell
gonna be
me
crime.
I'm out there representing individuals? Some people I
understand
talk to are like, yo, I rob people for a living. I want no job. But a lot of them say, I want a job.
Right.
Dude, if you
there's other mental behavioral issues that you're dealing with when you deal with an individual like that, and I'm telling you,
some people just want it that way. That's just who they are.
But that's crazy to even say that analogy, because you're saying that. So most of the people that are being locked up in Baltimore City, correct me if I'm wrong, are of color descent, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So are you saying that it's inept in us to be criminals? Okay, so then I'm trying to tell you that's not the case.
I'm saying some different people.
You're saying that some people have this mentality that I'm going to be a robber.
They do. Because they grew up like that.
Right. So they were taught like that, then they can be undeveloped like that.
That sounds crazy. That sounds like...
And even when you listen to people like Brother Bay, when you listen to people,
goddamn shit,
I would be spending the money a whole different total way. Trust me, because again, you spend $38,000 a year to house an inmate.
Yes,
you spend half your budget for public safety that gets you very little value on the dollar. I'm not. It's all related. It's all related.
Your overall argument makes no sense.
Now, I'll give you an example. In LA County.
No, we done been through this.
LA County. I'll give you an example. LA County, they had an area that had the highest murder rates out of all the counties in Maryland and in LA County. You know, LA County is made up of small little counties. All right. What they did was they actually did a stipend program. About $20,000, $25,000. You come to a program, you get trained, you get your GED, you get your mental health, you get your substance abuse health. They reduced they used to be the most violent area in LA. They reduced it down to where it's zero. It's zero. It's zero. It is 2-0. The only they did not have. They did not. I'm going to show you it. I'm going to show you. They had no murders. They had no murders in that county. The only thing that they did have was they did have some recidivism. So they did have some gentlemen. They had about 5-0. No, I said murders. I said murders. They had the highest murder rate in all of the counties in LA. All right. They reduced the murders 200 to 0. They didn't have 200. They weren't 200. They
I'm not saying police is the end all be all. Policing is one part. But to me, you want to take away all the policing.
I didn't say take away all the policing. I said stop relying on that as the safety net for public safety.
No,
that's
agree.
Not the solution.
But right now, we're so far. Right. We're so far back.
And I'm telling you, you can throw the whole budget in there and bring in the Man of Steel into Baltimore City, and it won't reduce the crime. I predicted 300 murders last year, and I'm predicting the same thing again this year, even with this police commissioner. Why? Because this city has an unhealthy pulse. The city has an unhealthy mentality.
Well, you have to look. You know, out of everything.
How did he get murders down in New Orleans? Then do they have a healthy pulse?
So again, you heard what he said. So again, Vargas said that it wasn't necessarily the police chief. Yes, that was a component.
No, it wasn't just the police.
Correct. It was wraparound services.
I agree. Have that?
No, we're just starting to really get into that with the $12 million youth fund.
Sheila Dixon had it.
And she had a great reduction.
Murder rates were still over 200,
but they were dropping down. It doesn't matter. They were dropping down. She had better crime stat numbers than what we have currently.
She did, but some things you say I do agree with, and some things that I don't. I understand what you're trying to say, but we're so far in a hole. Our policing has to sit down and be able to hold us up so that we can then make sure these other programs are in place so that we can turn the tide. It's like when you drive a big ship, you don't turn the big ship right away. It takes time.
Of course.
And so as you cut down the police overtime, that money then can be spent to make sure you go and invest in the community. Look, you know, the other day, Governor Hogan came and he talked about he's going to give us $50 million or something like this. The one thing that really bothered me about his announcement was simple. Where is the money for the rec centers? Where is the money for the wraparound services? That's what I wanted to say.
That $50 million was going to victim services, though.
Right.
So that could be a multitude of things.
Well, it could.
In terms of victim services.
It could, but specifically, I want to see job training, job investment, reinvestment programs.
Yes.
But it's still it's part of the whole process. Right now, what we're saying is one of the weakest links in our process here in public safety has been the police commissioner.
And
we're going to
correct.
make that a strength. Once you have that strong over here, then we can continue to take the money that was being used in the police department. We can allocate it in a different way.
Right. That was the same hope that you had with Davis. That's the same hope that you had with Detective what's his name? Dr. Anthony Batts. That's the same analogy that people were saying.
So
as far as
basically,
what's the name? It just got caught on the tax fraud.
Basically, because you sit down and say, here are police commissioners that haven't been successful, we should just throw it in. Throw
No, I'm saying that our main focus should not be on the police department and public safety. We need to start really looking at that front end approach. We're starting to, again, with programs like ROCA. I commend that. I said that the other day. I commend programs like ROCA.
To bring in something from Boston.
But he's just talking about ROCA is still
bringing something from Boston.
ROCA is
and
working
all
with
that money.
ROCA is working with 100 challenged individuals
that do
in the
the
city.
exact same thing that you could have gave that money to, but you don't because you're
Of
bringing a
course,
program.
and I've argued that too. I've argued that too.
We're gonna
People like David Miller
go back and
people like David Miller
arguing
Right,
and,
right.
and shouting over people.
Right.
It's not
Go
good
ahead,
radio. But nonetheless, I laugh at people like that because when
You're
we
not
talk
laughing at
about
me.
no, I do. I laugh
All
at
right.
people like because you don't understand how government works.
It's not about
Right?
government.
Yes,
it's
where do
about
you think
people.
public
It's
safety
about
comes
people.
from?
It's not about government. It's about people,
Jesus
and it's about
Christ.
communities, and it's
Are you
about
high?
families.
Are you high?
Okay.
Where do you think this comes
I
from?
really resent that you're even making that analogy on air like that.
Well, I don't care what you resent. At the end of the day, it is
Because I would never say that about anybody in here. Are
Let's
you
just
drunk?
say-
Are you high? Or whatever have you. I would never say
Jason
that. You could
just
say
has
maybe, are you
some
crazy?
strong-
Are you
yeah.
disturbed? Or something like that.
Jason
But
has
please don't
some
use that analogy.
very strong views around policing.
Of course.
I think some of it is basically because of your experiences. When you needed the police, they turned their back on you, and that's something you've never really you've gotten over. That's the prism in which you view the police. I get it. I understand.
I've watched it happen before the consent
But you know
decree
what?
was even
Okay.
drawn.
All right, I
before the
understand
DOJ came
You know
in.
what?
I
I've
testified
watched-
at the DOJ.
You know what? But I guess this is my thing. Dude, nobody in this room deals with the criminal justice system more than me. I've seen the worst of the worst. I've
Of
had
course.
judges ask me basically, yo, Bates, what's your beef? Judge, the cop's lying. Okay, and he
Right.
gets a gun off the street. What I realize, but what I've had to do
Because
as
they're
a
human
defense
too.
attorney is I have to believe.
Right.
And in the second you no longer have belief or hope, then therefore the system will never work successfully.
I don't believe in that system. I believe in the community. I believe the boots on the ground. I believe those folks that are working with the families and working with the communities. That's what I believe in more than I believe in that public safety initiative that we're currently
Well,
doing.
you know what? You can go ahead and live in a community with no police and only
Shane,
that.
come on.
I barely see.
Come on
I
with
barely
it.
see the
Sit
police coming to my community,
down.
and when they come in, it's always after
Okay,
the fact.
All right, you made your point. Come on, Shane. Come on, let's talk from a community leader standpoint. I know you didn't heard, because I saw you on there, the young man Vargas. Come on. We want to know, we want to get your take on some stuff. You sitting over there quietly. Are you still there, Mark? Or we lost you to Facebook
Yep,
again?
I'm here.
Okay, all right.
I'm here.
We still have one caller too
Yeah,
holding on the
the
line.
crazy-
You still have one caller holding on the line too.
Who is it?
Let's go to the line and find out when we get a chance.
Go ahead. What's up, Shane?
Hey,
Shane
guys.
Bryant. For those who don't know, I don't know how you don't know. Introduce yourself. What community are you affiliated with?
Hey y'all, so Shane Bryan here, president of the Edna Gardens Lakeside Civic Association, also affiliated with NECO, the Northeast Community Organization. And I mean, lively discussion here tonight. So something I would say is we've already been reaching out to ask for opportunities to interact with Mr. Harrison, and it's already been very well received. So already setting up opportunities for him to come into our communities, interested in attending neighborhood association meetings, setting up meetings in every single police district throughout the city. They're being much more proactive. I mean, I think he's probably much more interested in having those types of dialogues and conversations. He'll be coming out to some of the churches, to my understanding, and engaging with folks that way. So process-wise, as a neighborhood leader and just a member of the Baltimore community, I'm much more excited about the opportunity to engage with this individual. And the research that I've had, he seems like he's much more equipped to come in and make the changes that the department needs, clean the house maybe of some of the folks who are downtown, having the nice offices and headquarters that maybe need to go. So I'm excited. If I could as well, I'm very excited that today we just got an announcement that Natalie Preston was named the mayor of the Northeast District. Something we've also been asking for literally months now. So, I hear the concerns around policing and the tactics that are used in urban cities throughout the country, but I do believe that we're turning a page, and it's going to take all of us to be involved and to want to engage in this process. But we're going to have lots of opportunities, it sounds like, to get to know this individual.
So I take it you weren't this enthused behind Joel Fitzgerald.
No, not at all. I mean, mostly not enthused around his lack of interest or ability to engage with community. I mean, the crazy thing is, I talked to some folks who did get to engage with him. There's a very short, very small number of folks who did, but he's great. He was great in these, small group community meetings. I don't know why they didn't have more community meetings. I think they shot themselves in the foot with that. And so my concern was with the process. I never got to know the man. I wasn't impressed with where he was at before as it related to the city of Baltimore. But I think that, from the get-go, people were telling the mayor to go after Harrison, and whatever happened, and now we have this individual as our soon-to-be designee.
What is the pulse of your community in reference to public safety?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So we're actually launching next Tuesday a micro community policing strategy that is going to be something I think folks will be really interested in learning more about. I don't have a ton of information to share on that right now, other than it is a opportunity for communities to define what policing looks like in their neighborhood. As we know, this city has neighborhoods where they have different types of relationships with the police. And so in Edna Gardens Lakeside, we're very active, we're very proactive rather, in kind of defining what we want our patrols to look like and how we want them to respond to neighborhood disputes. And thankfully to folks like Major Preston and Jeffrey Shorter before her, we've been able to work with them in a way that we have a say in how the policing is happening in our neighborhood. I understand, though, that in other neighborhoods, there's a much different relationship with policing, neighborhoods that have been over-policed, and even, there's been police brutality cases on their streets. And so with that, it's going to take a lot more time to build trust and rebuild those relationships. I think it's something that we have to do. And with micro-community policing, that will be an opportunity for those communities. They will be able to define how those relationships will be rebuilt, and how they want the police to respond, or how they want neighbors to be able to handle different types of disputes or things that are happening in their neighborhood. One thing that I get frustrated with, I think, is we can't use a broad stroke to say policing should look like this for everywhere across the city. I don't think that's realistic, and we have to be able to have these officers, majors, lieutenants, what have you, be on board and understand that if we take an approach with the neighbors, this is what they're asking for, this is the type of policing that they want or that they want to engage in, we can be more successful, or at least we can truly get back to public safety, not just policing.
What would you say the health of your community is right now?
The health of the community?
Yeah.
I mean,
as far as recreational centers.
We ain't got no recreational center.
Right.
So
things to help with the wraparound approach that I'm talking about.
Right. Well, I think that we don't have. We had a rec center. We had a PAL center a long time ago down at Waverly. We're trying to fight to get that back. Edna Gardens Lakeside has been a consistent neighborhood for many, many years, and I think that is partially due to the amount of activism and just participation that the neighbors have. So we look after one another. We have a pretty robust block captain program. We try to make sure that, if there's something happening down the street, that we can respond and nip it in the butt. But, we don't have the rec centers. We don't have necessarily access to great public transit. And so, we still see there's definitely always a room for improvement. We might be one of the more healthy communities maybe I'm not really, I don't have the stats to back that up, but I'll say that we have a really active citizenry. And so if a tree falls down or something doesn't happen, that they're quick to let us know. But we work together on things. It's not, we're not going to blame our neighbors or, call out things that are inappropriate. We call out things that are inappropriate, but we don't want to call each other inappropriate things. We want to be able to build upon and work more neighborly.
I think the thing that you just said, the words that I heard were, we work together.
Right.
And I really think for us to really make a change, we must work together. When you look at your community now, because I know you've been wanting leadership from the police department, a major, for months. What you about, like 7-8 months? Y'all haven't had a major?
Yeah, he's been gone since probably July. Or he's still getting. That's the thing that's also crazy. Like, we're still paying this man to be on long-term vacation. And it's frustrating. Natalie Preston. Shout out to Natalie Preston for doing an amazing job, and her lieutenants for holding it together. But it's not equitable. The Northeast District is huge land-wise.
Yeah.
And she worked her tail off to keep it together. And another thing, historically in the Northeast District, a lot of the command staff come out of there. Like, they start in the Northeast District, they do the patrols there, they become lieutenants, and they get their leadership skills there, but they always get booted out to the next district. There's no consistency in having that long-term relationship with the community. So yeah, I mean, we're sending weekly emails to folks asking for that leader, but thankfully Preston was there, and she didn't let the vacuum happen and let things go by the wayside. She was committed to the communities of the Northeast District, and a lot of other folks were involved, but shout out to her.
I think that's some of the issues in some of the communities. You don't have that lower level leadership like the Bajors. I know in Irvington we've had some issues where we've had like 4 different Bajors, and they keep switching them out. And I know we have a few, I think, police departments that don't have a major at all currently, like yours, for instance. So, but I think that's also a key factor is having that lower level leadership, to rile the troops up, and keep them motivated and keep them with their set of instructions and their goals,
Wow. I guess when you look at the big picture, where do you see policing going in your neighborhood?
Yeah, so this micro community policing strategy, it's going to be it's something we're really excited about. We're not officially announcing what it's going to be quite yet. The neighborhood's going to be really involved, but it's like a 12 to 15 month process of the community regularly coming together to define what it is that we want when it comes to policing, and then they're going to do door-to-door surveys. They're going to working with OSI, the
Open Society.
Open Society. Thank you.
Right.
Open Society Institute and staff there. Probably some folks from Morgan State to help. And I believe there's 5 to 7 neighborhoods throughout the city that'll be piloting it. And through that, we're going to get a better sense. I mean, the folks who come to neighborhood association meetings are great people. They're not always representative of the entire community. And so something that's really great about this is they're going to go door to door, and they're going to connect with the folks that might not come to the neighborhood association meetings for whatever the reasons might be. And we want them to be involved and be able to also, help us identify and better know what.
Funny thing is, we were just having that conversation the other night with Mila Cromer, and she just said, "Did somebody say surveys?" Because we had that conversation the other night about doing that as a grant process. We're putting together a My Mainstream Media type of community viral thing, where the communities can now have their voice and stuff. And she had suggested, which is a great idea, and trying to collaborate with the foundations and to be able to go into these communities, like you said, door to door to the people that you usually don't hear from,
exactly,
you don't see, and not only do it once but continuously do it to see how their quality of life is going, whether it be because the new major is there or not having a major, or because this school just closed down and what that means for their community. So that's a big, and I do want to say shout out to people like OSI,
exactly,
Bob Emery with Able Foundation, Dr. Phil Leaf over there at Johns Hopkins Behavioral Science. These people really give for the community, and I know they get a bad rap from some groups about not giving to what they believe is the right people to do this stuff. But guess what? They're giving when they don't have to, and they're at least seeing some kind of difference, positive difference in their community by giving to people like yourself and the groups that are making a change in this across the city. So,
yeah, I think if nothing else, the one thing that I think we've been able to see is that people in Baltimore City really care about public safety. They have learned it. They've experienced the good, the bad. And when you sit down and look at Fitzgerald and you look at the new commission designee Harrison, you sit down and see it seems two different ways in which they're being handled. And you're seeing two different types of reactions. I think you see those reactions because people just want to be involved and they care. And that's really what you see. So when you see neighborhood organizations such as yours, and you're talking about and you're excited about policing, you're excited about a survey to have a better understanding what the community members need and what they want. And do they want people always walking the beat and stand on the corner? Do they not want that? What do they want to make them feel safe? I think you're right. Every single neighborhood is different. And how we police can't be one broad stroke. It has to be individualized to the neighbors and maybe even some neighborhoods to the various streets in the neighborhood.
And I think one thing with hopefully through this micro policing strategy is that we can start to go back to the ways of having the same officers in the same neighborhoods or in the same zones or whatever they want to call it. Right now, it's like every 28 days they get transferred to a different part of the district. Yeah. And it's
zone policing.
We don't have the even though we get to know those officers, the 28 days that they're there, at least the ones who will engage, then they're gone. And so I think on their side as an officer, they don't get invested in the personal relationships because they know they're heading out. I'm like, I'm not going to waste my emotional intelligence on this right now. But then at the same time, the neighbors don't trust them or they don't want to go to them for various things. I mean, so I really believe strongly, and I'm not a professional or a researcher in policing, but I would like to see that come back more, have some of the same officers in our neighborhoods longer term, and build those relationships where the kids do trust them and the parents are willing to work with them. I mean, we have distrust in our neighborhood as well. I mean, and we have lots of schools in our community too. So students at Mervo were being targeted walking to school, which is never okay because they're literally trying to go to school and they're getting targeted for robberies. But the kids won't say anything. They won't work with the police because of that relationship that they have and that their parents have.
And stop sitting in your cars at the Family Dollar store for your whole shift. Or what I hate the most is when they deploy officers to sit on Green Mountain 33rd all day, just sitting in the car with their lights on.
That's throughout the city.
That's going to prevent crime in that area, especially if there was a multitude of shootings, violent crime in that neighborhood. Not realizing as a drug dealer, you see them on the corner, I'm just going to go right around the corner.
I'm going 3 blocks around the corner.
Right there, I ain't got to worry about you.
But see, that's the difference between beat policing and zone policing. Right now, we're under a zone policing. And the problem with beat policing in the past was that officers would become too familiar with what was going on in neighborhoods, and in some cases could be enticed or even brought into organized crime. So that was one of the problems in the past with beat policing, or in some cases would bully the community, would become, an occupying force within the community because he knew everybody within the community. So he can go and, like back in the day, I remember back in the housing projects, the officers used to kind of slap us in the back of the head and, hit us with the baton and tell us to move on. But he knew us. He became too familiar.
But a lot of people love that, like especially when Grandma Edna knew that the police came and said, I've been over there acting a fool. But in here, and that was a way for the community, the community to trust the police because they knew them and had interactions with them for years, and that they knew everybody, so they knew they didn't even have to go lock you up. They saw Shane over there. Okay, don't worry, you can run now, but I'm gonna get you.
Well, sometimes they take you home. Sometimes they take you home
and be waiting for you. So
slap you up and take you home. Then your mama slap you up.
All right, Shane, thanks for joining us. We got to go, y'all. Remember, tomorrow, the great, the fabulous Karen York, Job Opportunities.
You forgot your caller on the line and everything.
Will be in the house. Maybe miss the talk. Interrupting. Who else? Karen York.
Karen
York. Job Opportunities Task Force in the House tomorrow night to wrap up the week. Next week, your main man, Joseph Kane. We talking about all the council candidates. 2nd District, 3rd District, 14th and 13th District, all the districts. Who's running for mayor? Who's running for council president? Who's running for city council? We'll be talking about that and so much more. And hopefully, law and disorder will be up. And we can talk about that as well.
Yes.
The highly anticipated legal podcast coming your way. And of course, Monday, look out for the Annapolis report, as always, as we break down the legislative process. But as always, new promise begins with a new day. Therefore, the promise of tomorrow is greater than that of yesterday.
Free Keith Davis.